Good day to you, it's Graham Paddock with another Paddocks Club video tutorial. Today we're going to look at the issue of requisitioning a general meeting. But let's start off with a more general question. Who can actually call a general meeting? Well, the trustees may call a general meeting whenever they think fit. And they must call a general meeting if they are requested in writing to do so by owners entitled to 25% of the total of the quotas in the scheme, or by bondholders holding mortgage bonds over not less than 25% in number of the units in the scheme. If the trustees fail to call a meeting when requested by those owners or bondholders, then those people may do so themselves. So that's the issue of who is entitled to call the meeting. What should a request to the trustees by owners or bondholders contain? Well, it should contain the names and signatures and the PQs of all the owners, or the signatures, names and details of registered bonds held by the bondholders. It should also contain proof of the authority of any person who's signing for somebody else, for an artificial owner, for a trust, or for a bondholder, the authorized representative of a bondholder. It should set out the text of any draft resolutions that the requesters want put to that meeting so that they can go on the agenda, whether or not they are unanimous or special resolutions. If requested, within what period must the trustees call the meeting? Well, they must call the meeting within 14 days of request. The period is calculated by excluding the date of receipt or delivery of that request, so that the very next day is day 1 of the notice. Then thereafter you include each following day until you get to the 14th day. But if the 14th day is a Sunday or a public holiday, then you delay the last day of the notice to the next ordinary day. So the last day of the notice can't be on a Sunday or a public holiday. The period is calculated in completed days. The exact time of delivery is not relevant. What happens if the period expires and the trustees don't call the meeting? Well, the owners or bondholders who requested it are entitled to call it themselves. And how must they do that? Some people assume that, well, they just hold the meeting on the next day. No. A meeting has to be called in a particular way, set out in the prescribed rules, whether that's being done by the trustees or by owners or bondholders who have acquired the right to call that meeting in accordance with the prescribed rules. So, written notice. And for that you'll probably need access to the body corporate records, because you may have to make sure that you give notice to non-owner trustees, to the managing agent, to qualified bondholders and to all owners. And obviously your agenda would set out the proposed resolutions. Then finally, let's look at who chairs the requisitioned meeting. The trustee chairperson, unless the meeting decides otherwise, is the person who chairs that meeting. You need to establish what votes are likely to be present or represented. You should consider lobbying owners to make sure that they are, and you should consider approaching bondholders. Specifically, if the scheme is in any sort of financial trouble, bondholders will probably be prepared to send a representative. Finally, let's just look at one or two frequently asked questions. Can the trustees vote if the resolution is to remove them? Yes, unless they are disqualified for some reason. Don't they have a conflict of interests if that's the purpose of the meeting? No. When they sit as trustees, they must recuse themselves if their own interests come in, but not in the context of a meeting of owners. If the trustees don't call the meeting, can't the owners or bondholders just hold the meeting the next day? As I suggested before, this is a common misconception. The answer is no. And one final thing is that the trustees, in calling the meeting, if they do choose to do so within the period, are not entitled to choose a date which is unreasonably long afterwards. They must do so within a reasonable period. The people who are now entitled to have this meeting are entitled to have it and have their issues dealt with within a reasonable period. Thank you for watching this tutorial. I hope it's been of assistance to you.